Why do good people often get crushed in the pursuit of success? What is the ruthless truth about achieving greatness? Today we unravel the complexities of morality and power and why virtue alone might not be enough to protect you in a world driven by ambition and self-interest. From the moment we're old enough to understand the world, we're told a comforting lie. Be kind, be honest, be fair, and good things will come to you. It's a story embedded in childhood lessons, fairy tales, and even the way society conditions us to behave. But as we step into adulthood, the rules seem to shift. The honest worker is passed over for promotion while the office politician climbs the ranks. The generous friend gives endlessly only to be taken for granted. The ethical entrepreneur plays fair only to be outmaneuvered by competitors willing to cut corners. It doesn't take long to realize that fairness is not a rule of the universe, it's an expectation drilled into us by those who benefit from our compliance. And this is not a new discovery. For centuries, thinkers have studied the nature of power, and they have all come to the same unsettling truth. Morality without power is a liability. Niccolò Machiavelli, one of the most controversial political thinkers in history, understood this better than most. Living in a time when rulers were overthrown overnight and betrayals were as common as handshakes, he observed that the people who held on to power were not necessarily the most virtuous. They were the ones who knew how to wield strength when necessary. He famously wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Machiavelli didn't say be feared at all costs. He said, if you must choose, it's safer to be feared than loved. Why? Because love is fragile. Fear ensures obedience, but the real power lies in being both. Respected enough to be loved, strong enough to be feared when necessary. Fear, on the other hand, ensures compliance. Those who are too eager to be seen as good often avoid confrontation, refuse to assert their needs, and become predictable. And predictability, that makes you an easy target. Nietzsche saw slave morality as a tool of control, teaching people to be meek while the powerful seized opportunity. But he didn't say, become ruthless. He urged people to rise above blind obedience, to create their own values instead of following those designed to keep them weak. He believed that these values weren't universally good. They were designed to keep the majority in check while a small number of people who rejected them seized power. When people are raised to think that self-sacrifice is noble and that ambition is selfish, they become easier to control. They stay in their place, work hard, and expect life to reward them, while those who refuse to follow these ideals rise above them. This idea is not just theoretical. You can see it in action in every workplace, every social dynamic, every hierarchy. The employee who never speaks up gets overlooked. The person who assumes the best in others is blindsided by manipulation. The friend who always says yes eventually finds themselves drained and resentful, while the takers in their life feel no guilt about exploiting them. This is why Robert Greene in the 48 Laws of Power warns that excessive honesty and fairness can make you a pawn in someone else's game. Those who always reveal their intentions, who never hold back information, who assume others will reciprocate their goodwill, these are the people who are easiest to manipulate. Power, Greene argues, belongs to those who understand how to be strategic, how to move in ways that others cannot predict, how to be good when it benefits them, but never at their own expense. The hard truth is that virtue alone does not protect you. In the wrong hands, it is a weakness. The belief that doing the right thing will naturally lead to rewards is not only naive, it's dangerous. Because in a world where some people are willing to exploit kindness, those who refuse to defend themselves are the first to be trampled. But does this mean morality has no place in success? That kindness is nothing more than an illusion? Not quite. Because while virtue alone is not enough, when combined with power and intelligence, it can become one of the most potent weapons of all. The key is knowing how to wield it. Step into any high-stakes environment, a corporate boardroom, a political debate, a high-pressure negotiation, and you will notice something almost immediately. The most aggressive, the most confident, the most unshakable individuals command the room. It's not always the smartest person who gets the deal. It's not always the hardest worker who gets the promotion. It's the one who is willing to take risks, seize opportunities, and impose their will on the situation. It's the one who refuses to hesitate. This is not an accident. Power, in its rawest form, has always favored those who are willing to take it. Throughout history, the bold, the dominant, the unrelenting have been the ones who rise, while the cautious, the hesitant, and the overly considerate have been left behind. Thomas Hobbes, one of history's most influential political thinkers, understood this truth better than most. He argued that beneath the thin veil of civilization, human nature is raw, brutal, and self-serving. Strip away the laws, the social norms, the expectations of politeness, and what remains is a state of nature where survival is dictated by strength, not fairness. He described this reality in one haunting phrase: "Man is a wolf to man." It's uncomfortable to think about, but it's impossible to deny. In environments where competition is high, it's rarely the most virtuous who rise to power. It is those who are decisive, those who do not hesitate to impose their will, those who understand that control is taken, not given. This is why, in war, in politics, in business, and even in everyday social dynamics, the bold dominate the timid. The reason is deeply psychological. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman discovered something fascinating about human behavior. People are wired to associate confidence with competence. The more certainty someone projects, the more people assume they know what they're talking about, even if they don't. A loud, self-assured leader, even if they are wrong, will often be followed over a quiet, hesitant one who is correct. It's why aggressive negotiators win better deals, why dominant personalities get elected, why those who push their ideas forcefully are more likely to be believed. Richard Dawkins, in The Selfish Gene, took this idea even further. He argued that self-interest is not just a human trait, it is a law of nature. Even acts of kindness and generosity at their core often have an underlying survival mechanism behind them. People cooperate when it benefits them. They are loyal when it serves their interests. And those who understand this, who know how to leverage self-interest rather than relying on goodwill, are the ones who succeed. This is why the most powerful people in history, those who built empires, ruled nations, or dominated industries, were not the most ethical nor the most ruthless. They were the ones who understood power at its core. They knew when to be aggressive, when to push forward, when to seize an opportunity before someone else took it first. Look at any list of the world's most influential figures, and you will see a pattern emerge. Steve Jobs was known for his relentless drive and his lack of patience for mediocrity. Elon Musk takes risks that others wouldn't dare to. Jeff Bezos built an empire not by playing fair, but by outmaneuvering his competition at every turn. These individuals are not just ambitious, they are bold, they act with conviction. They do not wait for permission, they do not hesitate. And because of that, they are the ones who shape the world while others watch from the sidelines. So where does that leave the rest of us? Does this mean that success is reserved for the cutthroat, that kindness is a weakness, that the only way to win is to abandon morality and become ruthless? Not necessarily, because while aggression and confidence may grant you power, power alone does not guarantee success. There is a reason many of history's most ruthless figures ultimately fell. There is a reason dictators are overthrown, why tyrants are betrayed, why aggressive business leaders often burn out or get taken down. Because power, when used recklessly, turns into destruction. And those who rise and stay on top are not just ruthless, they are something else entirely. They are strategic. They know that brute force may win the battle, but it does not win the war. They understand that real power is not just about domination, it is about influence, longevity, and knowing when to use force and when to hold back. This is why aggression alone is not enough. If you want to win and keep winning, you need something more. You need to understand how to wield power without it consuming you. You need to understand how to balance strength with wisdom. You need to understand that true power is not just about taking, it is about knowing when to give. Because the most powerful people in history were not just dominant, they knew how to use virtue as a weapon, and that is where the real secret to success begins. If ruthlessness were the only path to power, the world would be ruled by tyrants alone. But history tells a different story. The most enduring leaders, the ones remembered not just for their conquests, but for their influence, were not merely aggressive. They were strategic. They understood something that ruthless people often fail to grasp. Power gained through fear alone is fragile. Strength without wisdom crumbles under its own weight. And aggression, when unchecked, breeds enemies faster than it secures victories. This is why the most successful people are not just those who take power, but those who know how to sustain it. And that sustainability is built on something counterintuitive: virtue. Not the naive, self-sacrificing kind, not the kind that expects fairness from a world that does not operate on fairness, but virtue that is used with precision, not as a weakness, but as a tool. This idea is not new. Aristotle, one of the greatest thinkers of all time, studied power, morality, and success with a level of depth few have matched. He believed that the highest form of intelligence was practical wisdom, the ability to know not just what is good, but how and when to apply it. A person who's merely good may be admired, but admiration alone does not build influence. A person who is merely strategic may succeed, but without ethical grounding, that success is often short-lived. True power belongs to those who understand how to align morality with mastery of the game. For Aristotle, excellence was not accidental. He argued that those who shape history, those who build empires, lead revolutions, and create lasting change are not simply kind nor simply ruthless. They are intentional. They use virtue not as a moral obligation, but as a form of power. And those who fail to do this, those who assume that good intentions alone are enough, often find themselves at the mercy of those who do. In modern psychology, this same concept has been proven through extensive research. Adam Grant, one of the world's leading organizational psychologists, studied the impact of generosity on success. He found something shocking. The least successful people in the workplace were often givers, people who helped others, who were generous with their time and effort. But the most successful people, they were also givers. The difference was how they gave. Those who gave indiscriminately, without boundaries, without understanding reciprocity, were the ones who were exploited, drained, and ultimately left behind. But those who were strategic with their generosity, who knew how to create alliances, who set limits, who made sure their kindness was leveraged rather than squandered, became the most influential and respected figures in their fields. They didn't just give, they gave wisely. This is the key difference between power and passivity. Virtue, when wielded carelessly, makes you a victim, but when applied with intention, it becomes a force multiplier. It builds loyalty, it strengthens reputation. It attracts allies while keeping enemies at bay. And when combined with strength, it becomes something truly rare, undeniable influence. One of the most powerful examples of this comes from Viktor Frankl, a man who endured one of the most extreme tests of human resilience imaginable. As a survivor of Nazi concentration camps, Frankl witnessed the very worst of human nature: brutality, cruelty, the absolute absence of morality. Yet, through it all, he discovered something remarkable. The people who survived the horrors of those camps were not always the strongest physically, nor the most ruthless. They were the ones who found meaning in their suffering, the ones who held on to something bigger than themselves, an inner sense of purpose, an unshakable will, a belief in something greater than survival alone. Frankl's realization was profound. Even in the darkest moments, human strength is rooted not just in power, but in meaning. The people who endure, who influence, who rise above adversity are not just those who seize power, they are those who understand how to wield it in service of something greater. This is why virtue matters, not because the world rewards goodness by default, but because those who use goodness intelligently create something far more lasting than brute force ever could. Influence that cannot be destroyed, reputation that outlives opposition, power that is not built on fear but on something far more enduring, respect, loyalty, and the ability to move people not just through strength, but through inspiration. But inspiration alone is not enough. Knowing that virtue can be powerful is one thing, understanding how to use it is another. Because in a world that does not always reward fairness, in a system where many people are willing to take advantage of kindness, those who wish to lead with integrity must learn how to defend it. And this is where the real strategy begins. The world does not reward goodness by default. It rewards those who know how to use it. There's a reason why the most influential people are not simply kind or simply ruthless. They are those who have learned how to wield both power and virtue with precision. Those who rise and stay on top are not the ones who give without limits, nor the ones who take without consequence. They are the ones who understand the delicate balance between strength and generosity, between cooperation and control. They know how to be good, but they are never naive. There is a common misconception that to win in life you must choose between being a good person or being a successful one. That to succeed you must be cutthroat, manipulative, even deceitful. And yet, if this were true, the most powerful figures in history would be remembered only for their cruelty. But they are not. They are remembered for their influence. Influence is not built on dominance alone. It is built on alliances, trust, and perception. And this is where most good people fail. They assume that if they are fair, others will be fair in return. They assume that if they act with integrity, they will be treated with integrity. But the world does not operate on assumptions. Sun Tzu, the legendary military strategist, understood this principle thousands of years ago. He wrote that the greatest victories are won without fighting, that the most powerful individuals are not those who seek conflict, but those who make themselves indispensable. He believed that strength was not about destruction, but about positioning, and this is where good people go wrong. They focus on being liked when they should be focusing on being respected. They try to win people over with kindness when they should be winning people over with value. Because the truth is, respect lasts longer than affection, and power is built not through making people happy, but through making yourself necessary. Dale Carnegie, one of the greatest experts on influence, came to a similar conclusion. He understood that people are not moved by logic alone. They are moved by emotion, by connection, by how they feel when they are around you. He taught that the most persuasive people do not force their way to the top. They make others want to follow them. They win people over not by demanding power, but by making power seem effortless. The best negotiators, the most charismatic leaders, the individuals who command rooms without ever raising their voice, they all understand one thing. Power is about perception. And perception is something you control. This is where strategic goodness comes into play. Most people think of kindness as a trait, something you either have or don't have. But kindness, when used correctly, is not just a personal quality. It is a tool of influence. It can be used to build alliances, to disarm opposition, to make people trust you, to create leverage that cannot be easily broken. But for kindness to be a strength, it must be used with intention. This is what separates those who are exploited from those who are respected. Goodness, when given freely without consideration, makes you vulnerable. But goodness, when given in the right amounts, at the right time, to the right people, becomes something else entirely. It becomes leverage, it creates loyalty, it inspires reciprocation, it strengthens reputation. When people admire you, when they trust you, when they feel valued by you, they will go out of their way to support you. And support is one of the most valuable currencies of power. Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, called this the win-win principle. He argued that real success is not about taking as much as possible or giving endlessly without return. It is about creating situations where everyone benefits, where power is not taken at the expense of others, but built in a way that lifts both you and those around you. He saw power not as a finite resource to be hoarded, but as something that could be expanded through cooperation and mutual success. This is what the most powerful people in the world understand. Generosity, when paired with strength, creates something more valuable than dominance. It creates loyalty. And loyalty is something that no amount of force can manufacture. But even loyalty is not enough. Because no matter how much trust you build, no matter how much value you create, there will always be those who try to take advantage. This is why power requires not just kindness, not just intelligence, but the ability to enforce boundaries. The mistake good people make is assuming that fairness alone will protect them, that if they do the right thing, they will be rewarded. But fairness is not something that exists naturally. It is something that must be enforced. You do not get what you deserve. You get what you demand. And the difference between those who succeed and those who are used is that those who succeed are not afraid to set limits. This is what separates strategic kindness from blind kindness. The ability to know when to give and when to say no, when to be flexible and when to stand firm, when to negotiate and when to walk away. Those who understand this are never taken advantage of because they control their generosity rather than letting their generosity control them. The world does not belong to those who are ruthless. It does not belong to those who are kind. It belongs to those who understand when to be both. Those who use virtue with intelligence. Those who create value while maintaining control. Those who are respected not because they demand respect, but because they have made themselves irreplaceable. This is what true power looks like. Not dominance, not deception, not brute force, but control over oneself over one's actions, over one's own value in the world. And those who master this balance do not just survive, they thrive. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that playing fair isn't enough, that doing the right thing doesn't always lead to the right results, that effort and honesty, while valuable, do not guarantee success. And in that moment, a choice must be made. Do you give up? Do you change who you are? Do you become the very thing you once despised just to survive? Or is there another way? Many people, when faced with this reality, fall into one of two extremes. Some abandon their integrity entirely, embracing selfishness, deception, and manipulation as the only path forward. They convince themselves that power is a game of dominance, that morality is a weakness, that winning means leaving others behind. They become the ruthless, the cunning, the ones who view life as a battlefield where kindness is a liability and success belongs only to the cutthroat. And then there are those who refuse to adapt. They cling to the belief that if they just work harder, if they just remain patient, if they just keep being good, eventually the world will recognize them. They watch others rise past them, taking shortcuts, bending rules, playing politics, and yet they do nothing. They tell themselves that true success comes to those who wait, to those who deserve it, to those who keep their hands clean. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, while others pass them by. But history does not favor either of these groups. The ruthless burn bridges and make enemies until they have nowhere left to turn. The passive allow themselves to be overlooked, exploited, or erased entirely. Those who truly succeed, who truly rise to power and stay there, are the ones who reject both of these extremes. They are the ones who understand that success is not about choosing between morality and ambition. It is about mastering both. Marcus Aurelius understood this. As Emperor of Rome, he had more power than almost any other human being in history. He could have ruled with fear, crushing his enemies, demanding blind loyalty. Or he could have allowed himself to be passive, letting others dictate his fate, refusing to wield the authority he had been given. But he did neither. He practiced something far more powerful, self-mastery. He believed that true strength was not about controlling others. It was about controlling yourself. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In his eyes, the greatest leaders were not those who sought power for power's sake, but those who mastered their own impulses, their own emotions, their own weaknesses. Because the person who cannot be controlled by others is the one who can never be overthrown. This is what most people fail to realize about power. It is not just about action. It's about perception, about influence, about the ability to remain steady when others are reckless, to remain composed when others are emotional, to remain in control when the world around you is chaotic. Power does not belong to the loudest, nor the strongest, nor even the most ruthless. It belongs to those who cannot be shaken. Benjamin Franklin knew this better than most. He was not a king, he was not a general, he did not command armies or rule nations, and yet he was one of the most influential figures of his time. Not because he demanded power, but because he made others want to give it to him. He understood something that many people overlook. People do not follow those who try to force their way to the top. They follow those who seem destined to be there. Franklin mastered the art of reputation. He knew that power is not taken. It is cultivated. It is built through trust, through consistency, through the ability to make others believe in you before you even prove yourself. He also knew that the strongest form of influence was not dominance, but reciprocity. The ability to make others want to work with you, not out of obligation, but because they feel invested in your success. He discovered something now known as the Ben Franklin effect. The idea that when you ask someone for a favor, they are more likely to help you again in the future. Why? Because once they have done something for you, their brain convinces them that they must like you, otherwise they wouldn't have helped in the first place. This is real power. Not forcing people to obey, but making them want to support you. Not demanding respect, but inspiring it. Not controlling through fear, but through admiration and trust. But even influence is not enough, because no matter how respected you are, no matter how well you navigate human nature, there will always be moments where lines must be drawn, where enemies must be confronted, where power must be enforced. And this is where Machiavelli's final lesson comes into play. Many people misinterpret Machiavelli as nothing more than a strategist for ruthless leaders. They assume he advocated for deception, cruelty, and manipulation above all else. But that is not what the prince truly teaches. He did not argue that power should always be built on fear. He argued that fear, when necessary, is a far more reliable tool than love. That kindness is valuable, but only if it does not come at the cost of strength. And this is the final truth of success. It is not about choosing between goodness and power. It is about knowing when to be kind and when to be strong. The greatest figures in history did not succeed by being entirely ruthless, nor by being entirely virtuous. They succeeded because they understood how to balance both. So where does that leave you? It leaves you with a choice. You can continue believing that fairness will eventually reward you, that patience will eventually be noticed, that goodness on its own is enough. Or you can accept the truth that success is not given but taken, that power is not inherited but built, that fairness exists only when it is enforced. This is not about abandoning integrity. It is about understanding that integrity must be paired with strength, that kindness must be guarded by intelligence. The success is not about waiting for permission, it is about commanding it. So the next time you find yourself being overlooked, underestimated, or taken advantage of, ask yourself this: are you being good strategically, or just hoping the world will reward you for it? Because those who win in life are not the ones who are simply good, they are the ones who know how to make their goodness powerful. And those who master that balance, they do not just succeed, they become unstoppable.